Impact has new vision and mission statements for 2023. Our vision states what the ideal world would look like from our perspective. A community that thrives by supporting its members to pursue what is relevant to their health, well-being, and values, acknowledging and respecting each person's unique context. Our mission sets out what role we are taking on to help that vision move closer to reality. When passions, purpose, or meaning are frustrated, there may be nowhere to go but toward what may look or feel like the edge. At Impact, we strive to stay at the edge so there is a welcoming community for people when they are there. As these statements imply, we are focused primarily on approaching what has been called wicked problems. One way to conceive of the difference between a merely complex problem and a wicked problem is that in a complex problem, the problem is definable. That's not to say that solving complex problems is easy. With a complex problem, bringing all the known pieces of the solution together in the right way can be quite a challenge. But if we lived in a world with unlimited resources, unlimited time, and unlimited money, every complex problem could be solved. With a wicked problem, there is no way to define the edges of the problem. The risk in mistaking a wicked problem for a complex problem is that you may think there's somehow a way to pull the problem away from everything else and solve it like you would a complex problem. Then you just put it back where it belongs and all is quickly messed up again. Wicked problems resist solutions that simply improve on what already exists. This works, so we just need more of it. Improvement is evidence-based practice. Wicked problems require innovation. Innovation is not evidence-based practice, even if it can be usefully informed by evidence. Innovation relies on what would be called practice-based evidence. Another way to say this is, first you try something, practice, and then you see what happens, evidence. Innovation is nothing if not risky. So what risky innovations has Impact been working on lately, you ask? Well, we'll tell you. Nomad, community building, a verb and a noun. In North America, a prime example of a contemporary wicked problem is what is often called homelessness. There is a vast array of conflicting opinions about what even causes homelessness, from personal irresponsibility all the way to late-stage capitalism. Depending on the cause that is settled on, there's likewise a vast array of solutions that have been tried. And despite all of these interventions being enacted to some extent, the problem is demonstrably getting worse. One of the most acute and obvious problems related to homelessness involves exposure to extreme weather, which, whatever your view on climate change, we have had in unprecedented ways in BC over the last few years. Over nearly 15 years of Impact's collaboration with the street community in Abbotsford, through supporting the drug war survivors, folks have been dismayed, though not surprised, when they've been consulted about new programs to meet their needs, only to feel their ideas have been stolen and then not carried out in the spirit they'd envisioned. If only we were given the chance to run something, has been a frequent refrain. And there's usually someone in a DWS meeting who is in a crusty mood to provide a salty end to that sentence. Something like, it would be a fucking mess. It's not hard to understand why even people within the street community are skeptical. Nearly a decade ago, the drug war survivors ran a protest camp in Abbotsford that contributed to the BC Supreme Court deciding in their favor in a landmark case against the city of Abbotsford. That success arguably came at a great cost. To say that DWS ran the protest camp would be a gross overstatement. With the camp being illegal itself, rightly or wrongly, folks living there assumed they would have no support from our society's recognized authorities. It didn't take long for predators to figure out it was open season on Abbotsford's most vulnerable. Largely because most of the rulings, and especially the strong advice from the BC Supreme Court, have resulted in very little apparent change, the idea of starting another protest camp has arisen over and over in the intervening years. For those who were part of the original camp, even the idea has been a traumatic trigger. It's not that starting a new camp is hard, it's actually disturbingly easy. Whenever one of the street community's natural leaders conspicuously sets up a tent, by morning, a camp of folks desperately hoping for community and safety has sprung up around them. If bylaw officers aren't the next to arrive, it's the predators. If the street community was going to try to develop another respite from the elements for themselves, it would preferably be on a different footing. But where and how to start? Necessity is the mother of innovation. The COVID-infused winter of 2020 had bone-chilling cold snaps. Social distancing dictated that every staff person at a warming center meant one fewer guest. So the DWS Peer Network decided to run a peer-run warming center a few days a week in the unused basement of a local church that was willing to go out on a limb to rent to them. The summer and winter of 2021-22 brought more deadly cold snaps, an unprecedented heat dome, and historic flooding. With funding from the Union of BC Municipalities, we were able to partner with the City, Archway Community Services, and 5 and 2 Ministries, with Abbotsford Restorative Justice and Advocacy Association to help navigate internal and external challenges. Together, we ran a drop-in center, the cabin on Sumas Way, and an emergency weather response overnight shelter, the Lodge, near downtown, with peers from the street community as an integral innovation. It's safe to say that, as much as no one would want to repeat the experience of the protest camp, they'd also resist a repeat of either the warming center, the cabin, or the Lodge. Innovation isn't about arriving at the uppercase answer. It's about arriving at better and better lowercase answers. With wicked problems, what we need to learn is not yet known. We must create that knowledge ourselves. This past winter, guided and compelled by the knowledge, both refreshingly positive and disturbingly negative, we developed over the last 2 years, when the opportunity to run their own overnight shelter in their own space presented itself, the group jumped. Our biggest stumbling block in 2021-22 had been finding a landlord to even rent to us. After being turned down by landlord after landlord for nearly 2 months, we finally settled on suboptimal spaces that Archway already leased or owned. When, in fall of 2022, the landlord of a well-placed, for many reasons, property on West Railway, what used to be Nomad Auto, didn't immediately balk at our proposal, the group decided we needed to jump before any second thoughts settled in. We signed a lease before knowing whether we could get insurance for what we were planning to do there, before knowing what the capital improvements we'd need to make might cost, before consulting with the neighbors, with the city, even with our board of directors. We recognized this project was going to overflow with problems. Generous, surprising, confounding problems. If we look first, we risk never jumping. There is a fine line somewhere between stupidity and courage. We didn't look for it. We're working on gathering the knowledge we generated this year to inform whatever lowercase answers come next. We look forward to sharing some of that with you as we move forward, but for now, because unlike in previous years, we didn't receive any press coverage as we never bled enough to make it into the "if it bleeds, it leads" newspapers, here are some basic stats that point to the usual benefits of opening an extreme weather shelter, and what might be the unique advantages of trusting folks from the street community to run that shelter. 124 nights open, 2,544 warm bed stays with 5,088 meals served, 176 paid peer shifts worked by 9 peer-hired and supervised staff, more than 850 episodes of peer witnessing to respond to possible overdose, 15 overdose reversals, 0 fatalities, only 5 calls by peers to police for support, and over 200 service referrals.